Welcome to Bella Italia. So to get started, we'll give you a quick overview of the segments that we'll kind of go over tonight. So we'll do a bit of an overview and sort of hit some of the general things that you'll want to know regardless of where in Italy you'll be traveling to, as well as, we'll go over the basic travel advisories and what you need to take care of in order for COVID and things like that, as well as just sort of what are good words to know, what are the local foods and how do we order them, and we'll cover some cafe and gelato and all that, and then we'll start looking at in depth at a few locations that are sort of the most popular in Italy, which is Rome and Tuscany. And then because I'm here in Naples, so I will talk about sort of my backyard with what's really available to do in Naples and the Amalfi Coast. And hopefully we won't take too long. So as a quick overview, Italy has capital city is Rome. And there's about 60 million people here. We're on the euro, same as probably most of the rest of you. So that makes conversions pretty convenient. And in terms of getting to Italy, it's pretty easy to just fly into Rome. That's sort of the hub here. And there are quite a few airports in a lot of the smaller towns that you can really be selective on where you're going. And if you don't get quite down in depth as much as you want to, the trains actually run really frequently, and the train routes are fantastic, that you can get to a lot of very small towns that you wouldn't necessarily expect the trains to go to. The thing about Italy is that we are not a timely people here, so don't expect the trains to run the way if you're in Germany. This is not a really timely system, but you will definitely get to where you're going, and it's everybody's sort of like, oh, piano, take it easy, have a coffee, don't worry too much. Just a little note, when queuing up, you'll find the farther south in Italy that you go, especially we really don't queue in lines. We crowd the gate, and there's a little bit of jockeying and pushing and stuff like that, especially in the airport. And even it's actually gotten a lot better since COVID, but there's still a little bit of this that whenever I've flown around Italy, I can tell I don't have a local travel crew when they're like, no, really, we just want you to stay seated until we announce that you can stand up and leave. And, everybody just rushes the front of the plane. So we don't do well in terms of lining up in queues, but if you're lining up to go into a museum or a Duomo or something like that, there definitely is a queue line, and they will look at that. But if you're just sort of in a crowd of people and you're kind of in a line, but you don't know who's the last person, you just say chi è l'ultimo, and that means who's the last. And so somebody will raise their hand and you're like, chi è l'ultimo, and somebody will raise your hand and you go, okay, so you can watch for when they go up and know that you're next. That doesn't mean you're not somebody might still try to cut in line, but it's sort of the local way, and you'll get a little bit more respect, at least for trying to follow the customs. In terms of tipping, you would kind of tip generally wherever you are used to tipping, but you don't need to worry about what percentages. You just generally tip €1 or €2 per person, especially when you're talking about restaurants. If you're doing more than €1 or €2 per person at a table, some Italians, especially like mom and pop places, will almost find it offensive because they feel like, well, why are you giving me so much money? Like, you think that I'm not running a good business here. So it's nice to leave a tip at the restaurant. A lot of times when you sit at a restaurant, you will also see a coperto. We'll talk about that more later, but it's sort of like a table cover charge. So generally, if you've got a coperto, you're not required to tip, but I usually do, but again, like €1 per person. So if you're getting ready to travel here, if you're taking plane or boat, Italy is very specific with plane or boat. So I don't know exactly how it works, but if you're at least prepared this way for the train going across the border, you'll be totally fine. So it's just saying that you need to show your green pass or your COVID vaccination card, or show a negative swab test within the last, I think, 72 hours prior to boarding. But if you're coming from Canada, you actually have to do both, and you have to take the long COVID test. The rapid test isn't good enough. So you have your vaccine passport and you have a negative test, only if you're coming from Canada. So anywhere else from our EU countries, you're fine. And they've been increasing with making sure that you're showing your green pass or your vaccine passport, vaccine pass in all of these things, like indoors for restaurants, any kind of shows or theater events or anything like that. So generally, if you know you're going into a place that's going to be filled with people, even though they've been restricting how much, we're kind of at, I think, usually 50 to 75% in terms of filling to capacity now. But just make sure that you have your pass. There have been a few people who will occasionally have issues if because the locals here in Naples don't have the green pass. We're still working on getting them. So we're using a long form card that has our vaccine information. And occasionally we'll run into somebody who doesn't want to honor it, and they say you have to have a green pass only. So if that's how you're traveling, is with an actual piece of paper instead of the barcode with your green pass, it's sort of a good idea to find the what do you call it? The travel advisories and the regulations, and just have them printed out. So you can say, well, no, actually it says this, just as a backup. But generally there hasn't been much of a problem here. And again, once you're in for 90 days. You can stay here for up to 90 days without a visa. And if you want to stay longer, then you just have to get a visa. In terms of security considerations, really, it's about the same as most other places in Europe. Just, travel with awareness so that you're aware, and, you can reduce your chances of being pickpocketed or something like that. There is a little bit of organized crime, especially the farther south that you get in Italy, and it's generally not too bad. It's not really present. And if you think that you're, in a restaurant and you see some kind of shady looking characters who you think, oh, they could be mob bosses, like, that's super cool. Yeah, it's super cool, but just leave them alone, right? Just, common sense. Medical care is kind of the same. It's pretty good. I haven't actually used the hospitals or anything here on the economy, but the pharmacias or the pharmacies here have pretty much anything that you could want. You almost don't need to go to a doctor for a prescription. You can go to the pharmacist and they can get what you need. So, and the emergency number for you to call is 112. Your embassy is in Rome. That's our lovely picture on the front. We share it with another country. I'm trying to remember. But if you're in Rome on your little walk over into Vatican City up to St. Peter's, you'll go by the embassy. I haven't found exactly where the consulate is in Milan because I haven't gotten to Milan yet, but stay tuned. I should have that soon. So when you're speaking or just sort of listening around, here are some helpful words for you to know, and just also as a forethought, when I love to listen to everybody speak around me, but Italians are super passionate speakers, and we use our hands. So expect that when the conversation gets really animated, a lot of times there was a bit of a cultural difference here that it took a bit of adjustment to, because you're just like, wow, they are really getting into it. And like, no, they're not. They're just speaking passionately. And it's probably something stupid like, what are we going to make for dinner tonight or tomorrow, or who's coming over, or something stupid. But it can sound sometimes like they're really getting angry with each other, and it's not that at all. So to say hello, the formal hello is salve, the informal is ciao. So you'll see people say like ciao. It's really easy to get into the habit to just be like ciao, because that also means bye. So you're like ciao, or ciao ciao is bye. If you get into when you're speaking with people that this is like a one-time thing, you're in a corner shop or even at the hotel, when you want to speak more formally, you should say salve, or you'll say like buongiorno or buonasera. Saying ciao is really supposed to be reserved for your familiars. And most younger people don't really care. They're not upset by it. But if you run into some older people, they're still of the generation where there is a difference, and they would appreciate it if you kept in mind the difference between them. So buongiorno, good day. Buonasera is good evening. We start saying buonasera around 4 p.m. So if you, when you get into the afternoon and you're like, but 4 p.m. really isn't evening, it's just sort of how they make the shift. You can always look up good afternoon, which is buon pomeriggio, but also that's very formal. So you just kind of go with whatever. And if it's like 2:30 p.m. and you're just like, I don't know, then just salve is always a good, easy way. Yes, sí, no, super easy. Please is per favore. It's really easy for people who have a little bit of Spanish to switch into por favor. And so it's one of those things that I always have to keep in mind to say like per favore. Now, probably if I go back and visit Latino countries, I'll probably accidentally be saying per favore instead of por favor. So please is per favore, thank you is prego, which also kind of means in Canadianese, like have at it, or like giver, right? So like if somebody gives you a plate or something there and you're like, oh, grazie, they'll say, sorry, I totally messed it up. Thank you is grazie. Prego is you're welcome. So there, it's sort of like, yes, have at it. And again, sorry, I totally missed the writing here, because thank you should be grazie. It's spelled Grazie. To say where is dove. How much, when you're in the markets or in the store, you'll just say quanto costa. And you can point at whatever you're looking at. So it makes it pretty easy. The farther north, like when you get into Rome and anything farther north, it's pretty easy to find people who are also English speakers. When you start getting into like Naples and really southern Italy is where you'll find more people who don't speak English. So, but they're usually very friendly, so you don't have to worry about it too much. Again, to say, do you speak English? You say parla inglese. If you say I don't speak Italian, non parlo italiano. Goodbye, the formal goodbye is arrivederci. But again, like I'd mentioned before, you'll see people say ciao or ciao ciao. And it's a really fun thing for me when I'm listening to Italians talk on the phone when they're hanging up the phone, because they will say like a million chows afterwards. So it'll be like, see, ciao, 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 ciao. Like, and it's a bunch. So that's just all that's going on. Lots of bye-byes. Restaurant, ristorante. We'll talk more about the different types of restaurants that you have. Toilet is bagno officially, but you'll see a lot of them call it the toilet. Hospital is ospedale, police is polizia, fire is vigile del fuoco, and pharmacy is the farmacia. Since in Italy, I guess we kind of feel like eating is life, like the two go hand in hand. There are a ton of different names that you would have for the different types of restaurants. So if you see something, here's a little quick, easy cheat sheet to kind of figure out about what it is. That a ristorante is like fine, elevated dining, but an osteria is more like a family restaurant. Trattoria is also casual dining. And then you start getting into names based on the type of food that they're serving. Like pesceria is seafood, rosticeria is your rotisserie, which are really, really good, and they're very plentiful around here. Pizzeria, we're in Naples, so of course everything is a pizzeria. Pizza Italio is pizza by the slice, compared to if you just go to a regular pizzeria, you will potentially be getting an entire pizza. But you know, who's going to complain about eating an entire margarita pizza, right? Taverna is the neighborhood pub. So you can think of like what we know of as a bar is more like a taverna, whereas for them, when you see bar, they're talking about a coffee shop. And paninoteca is a sandwich shop, and enoteca is your wine bar and shop. So usually they'll do a little bit of wine tasting at the enoteca, and then you can taste a little bit and then buy your wine. When you're choosing restaurants, it's really easy. Like there's usually just a ton to try to choose from. And I've found that when I'm traveling, especially the worse the food is when you're in a really, really popular piazza. So if you try to go just even like a block outside, like the most super touristy piazzas, you'll probably get pretty good food. If you see a small family restaurant and you can tell that it's a family restaurant and like the nonna is still back there, the grandmother is still back there cooking, you cannot go wrong, and you should just go and sit down, because it will probably be like the best food of your life. Speaking of the best food of your life, there's the focus in Italy that everything should be grown locally, and you should be really eating what's available in season and in region. And so then you really get these focuses depending on where you are in each region as to whether what types of foods are really good and really special. So you will get pizza unlike any other pizza in Naples. Even if you go up to Pisa, the pizza can still be good. It's going to be a little bit different, and you will probably find some different toppings and different things just because they're focusing on what the specialties of their region are. So when you're looking at that, you can even get a lot of animosity between people in terms of recipes, local recipes, and how you should actually authentically prepare things. And even there will be differences, such as like where I live just outside of Naples in a little town called Pozzuoli, there are certain pasta dishes that the native Pozzuolians will prepare differently than the Neapolitans, and they will like, that's when you will find them really getting into it as to the proper way to actually fix some of the dishes. So you have some of that, but also you can embrace, you know, the love culture about it and really just experiment depending on your region. So for example, this is a little graph that kind of shows you the different regions of Italy. And they'll give you at the top underneath the region, it'll give you one of the sort of the local food specialties. And then you've got, of course, your different wine specialties. So it's maybe a good idea, depending on where you're going, to get familiar with what the local wines are and what to expect, especially if you're a vinophile a little bit, to really get excited about some of that. And for sure, like that's a great reason to just come and visit Italy, because the wine is plentiful and it is cheap, and there are so many different kinds. Coffee is also a big deal. So a lot of us are addicted to caffeine, and we're addicted to having our cup of coffee in the morning. And if you don't get what you're asking for in the morning, like that can ruin your whole trip. So I want to make sure that we're spending a little bit of time in this, because I swear everybody I've talked to has had somebody visit where we go over, like they'll sort of go over sort of the rules and say, okay, remember, like don't just order, if you order a coffee, it's going to be an espresso. So if you're looking for your regular coffee and you want the coffee Americano, like make sure that you don't just order a cafe, or don't order a latte, because you receive the wrong thing and it can just sort of mess up your whole thing. So don't just order a cafe because you get an espresso, which I'm personally happy with. So that works great for me. If again, you're here in Naples. Naples is vying with another city, and I can't think of what the name of the city is, but it's farther up north, for UNESCO sort of ownership of coffee. And they want to be listed as the UNESCO sort of heritage site for Italian coffee. Only one of these cities is going to be able to win, and I have no idea who's going to be in charge of making that decision and how many people they're going to really piss off when they make that decision. But Naples is sort of in the running, and if you get a cafe Napolitano, that's something that you will only find here. The way that we like coffee in Naples is it's an espresso, but it's been pre-dissolved with a little bit of sugar in with the coffee before they actually pour the rest of the espresso in. So they like the coffee should be very, very strong and then very, very sweet. So that's always something, if you like a sweet coffee, or if you're like, oh, I would be kind of interested in an espresso if it just weren't such a slap in the face. Like, you get a slap in the face with the coffee, but it's kind of tempered with sugar, so it's not too bad. And another thing is when you order a cappuccino, which is another one of my favorites, once you're pushing sort of 10:30 or 11 a.m., it's not a good idea with the locals. They'll give you a weird look if you try to order a cappuccino, because they feel that that sort of milk, especially with the amount of milk that you get in a cappuccino, will interfere with your digestion, so that you shouldn't be putting it in your coffee after the morning. It's totally up to you. If that's really ultimately what you want and you don't care if they give you a silly look, order it anyway. You know, you can still have it. It's fine. So again, you've got some options on the right to look through kind of later on different types of coffee. Actually, one other one to mention is the cafe corretto, which is something that a lot of people who live here don't really know about. But you'll notice when you go into coffee bars, you'll see that there is a huge assortment of liquor on their back wall. You're like, well, do they open as a bar later on? Like, what is the reason? It's for the cafe corretto. So corretto really means corrected. So you're having a corrected coffee by having a little bit of booze to flavor your coffee. Now, typically you'll see like grappa or brandy, but you can also find some really nice liqueurs like Di Serono and stuff like that as well. So if you've had a really long night and you just need a little hair of the dog, it's a great way to just get a cafe corretto. So when you do go in and order coffee, because we've gone over like what not to do, and you'll see when you go into coffee shops in Italy that they are very serious and they are very fast. This is not a culture where you sit and enjoy coffee and sort of lounge. Most of the Italians take their coffee at the bar standing up, because it's short, right? It's just a couple of shots of espresso and you're done. So it's a very quick thing. So there's always time for coffee because it's a very quick thing. But it can be really intimidating when you're going, because you see a ton of Italians sort of pushed up against the bar and you don't really know the first thing about what you're doing. So a lot of coffee shops do have chairs outside. If you really want to just sit and have your coffee, you can still do this. But if you want to have a coffee like an Italian, you'll just stroll up to the bar or kind of watch and see what people are doing. Sometimes they'll have a cashier there first, so you can go and place your order with the cashier. You'll pay for your coffee and then you get a receipt. And the barista will take your receipt and will make your coffee for you. Usually, when you're ordering your coffee, there's about a 20 cents difference that you'll always, if you're giving them a few euro, they'll give you a little bit of small change back, and that makes it easy for you to then tip your barista with that 20 cents or whatever it is. The other thing that you can pay attention to is that when they serve you your coffee, they will serve it with a small glass of water. And to be proper, you should drink the water first, not after. It's a palate cleanser for beforehand, because they believe in the quality of the coffee. So you drink your water first to cleanse your palate, and then you finish with your coffee. And you'll see a lot of places as well. If you really like having an Italian coffee, you can take home a mocha pot, and it's really, really easy to make them there. And you can get ground espresso at any of the shops here. And I've actually found them in a lot of other countries as well. And you can even, if you can't find it back in Canada, you can actually still order it on Amazon. So it's a nice gift to give people as well. And then let's follow up with gelato, because I have not found a gelato that I haven't liked, to be perfectly honest, but there are different quality levels of gelato. So when you're traveling and you've had a long day of walking and you just need a nice little cool pick-me-up, and gelato is really perfect for that. It's good to know what you're getting or what you're walking into. And if you're going to sort of treat yourself with a gelato, then why not do it with the, the really, really good gelato. So gelato is churned much more slowly. They use a little bit less sugar and less fat when they're making it. So it's really not an apples for apples version of ice cream. I've seen a lot of stores that will label themselves as artisanal or artigianale gelato, and you can tell that it's all exactly the same as what's next door, which is, and they're just these piles of heaping super artificial gelato with some little bits of fruit and stuff on the top of it. So if you're going to make sure that you're picking out a really good quality gelato, you'll look for a place that doesn't have like a billion and one flavors and doesn't have like a super enormous amount, because you want them to be making it in smaller batches more frequently, as well as without artificial things. So hopefully your colors that you'll see should be a little bit more muted. Your berry flavors are still going to come out looking like blue and purple, but they don't have to, scream Blue's Clues. And so they'll be a little bit denser. There are some really great Google sites in terms of finding like the best rated gelaterias, depending on which city you're going to visit. So if, gelato is definitely on your bucket list, maybe that's a good thing to sort of spend a moment to do. My favorite gelato place in all of Italy is actually in San Gimignano. So I'll give you that information later. But yeah, take recommendations from the locals. Sometimes you'll see, especially in the summer, you'll see where the big lines are, and that's usually a good sign. When you're traveling here, Italy is one of the most touristed countries of, for sure, Europe, but I think in the world. The tourism has gone just off the charts. When I visited here back in 2000, so more than 20 years ago, I thought it was pretty busy. And coming here in 2019 was just, it was shocking to me how crowded and sort of overpopulated tourist season is really in Italy. COVID has really changed and shaped that. There are much fewer tourists, so this is a fantastic time of year to be visiting now while you're still sort of in the shadow of COVID. The most touristy, crazy times of the year is going to be in the summer. And you'll find especially Europeans will go farther south in the summer. So Northern Italians go into Southern Italy for the beaches in the summer in August, like end of July and August. So sort of keep in mind that, well, some of the cities might be a little bit more open because a lot of the locals will have gone for their vacation farther south. But generally, once you get into sort of starting like now, where you're in sort of mid to late September, this is the perfect time to come and visit Italy. The weather is beautiful. The tourists are tapering out, but the shops and everything are still open. If you were to hit the Amalfi Coast in like January, it's probably amazing. There's a bit more chance of rain, but you've got the beach all to yourself. However, a lot of some of the like tourist shops and things like that have closed down for the winter. So ideally for me, if I was going to recommend times, I would say, mid to late fall, and then start in March and start with the spring and go into, once you hit June, it starts really picking up with tourists. So if you're not a fan of just being in a throng full of people, which not many of us are, it's sort of a better, the weather is better. It's just sort of a nicer time to go. You can still come over your summer vacation. It can get really, really hot and really humid, even when you're in the cities, and it can get a little bit oppressive. Make sure that when you're coming, depending on where you're going, if you're in northern Italy in the wintertime, it could be rainy or snowy. If you're in southern Italy in the wintertime, you're really not going to, you might see a little bit of rain, but generally it's pretty temperate. So the one thing that I would say when you're packing for Italy, if you're going to be walking around, you need to have shoes that you've broken in first. Don't be bringing in shoes that you just bought, even though you're like, I know these shoes, they're super comfortable, I've had them before. Bring in a pair of broken in shoes, because the streets that you're walking on are always cobblestone, and a lot of times the cobblestones have not really, they've not been kept up, and you might be walking on like 2,000-year-old cobblestones that have not been sort of updated, or they've just been patched, and it's treacherous, and it will kill you for sure after a full day of walking around Rome like that. So make sure you've got really comfortable shoes that you could feel like you could do a marathon in. If you're going in the summer and you're planning on visiting churches, just know that especially when you get into some of the higher basilicas and like St. Peter's and some of the Duomos, they don't want you to go in while you're wearing tank tops or shorts or skirts above the knee, or sandals. They're in the summer, they're a little bit more willing to sort of forgive you for wearing sandals, because there's not a ton that they can do about it. But definitely if you're wearing a tank top, just tuck a scarf in your backpack or whatever you're carrying, like just a lightweight scarf, and that way you can just throw it over your shoulders before you go in, and you should be good to go. Some of the places will actually give you like a paper shawl to cover up as well, which is an option if it's required, but not all churches will be prepared like that, and so some of them may just turn you away. So it's just sort of a good thing to keep in mind. Plus, if you're here during sort of like that in-between season, it's nice to just have a scarf in case it suddenly, a chill comes up or something, then you can cover up. When you're looking to, again, travel safely and not make yourself a target for pickpocketers, if you come in the wintertime, Italians wear like all black or very dark muted colors in the wintertime. So if you come in and you've got, your bright red raincoat or something like that, you are going to stick out and you will definitely be a target. So it's just something to keep in mind depending on when you go. If you're here like late spring through like the summertime months, you will see all sorts of bright colors and everything, and so you're fine. But you do stand, I've noticed even I don't wear very many bright colors and I still feel like I stand out in the wintertime. So it's just something good to keep in mind. When you're out and about, there is like a siesta time here where it's called riposo, and restaurants and shops will close down usually in the afternoon unless they're like larger grocery stores or certain things where they'll say in orario that they'll keep constant hours. But generally restaurants will open for lunch starting no earlier than noon, and then they'll close down at about 2:30 or 3, and then they reopen around 6 or 7 to do dinner, and then they'll go like all night. Shops usually open at 9 or 10 in the morning, and they'll go until 1 or 1:30 in the afternoon, close for riposo, and then they open usually around 4 p.m. and then close, depending on where you are, like 7 or 8. When you use Google, if you're checking something, to sort of definitely use it for locations and getting to the places that you want to go. However, I've noticed, except for when I've been in the northern part of Italy where they're really catering to German tourists, that Italians do not update their Google profiles. So it may say that they're open all day long and they're really not. They just haven't updated their profile in like 4 years, and somebody thought it was a good idea to stay open all the time and then they'd stop doing it. So don't depend on the hours of operation or anything like that when you're looking at information of like the data on Google, but for sure use Google Maps to help get yourself around. When you're looking at going to museums or restaurants, it's always a great idea to book in advance. A lot of times you can skip the line when you're visiting popular museums and churches. So just check out the website, because you can get the ticket online, and then you're skipping a big line. So that's been sort of the key to our success when we've been traveling here, is that we've been very happy to just sort of look a day or so in advance and book our stuff online in advance. All right, so that's your general information. And now let's look for in-depth things in terms of which places that you're looking for to go to. So we'll talk about Rome first, and then we'll hit Tuscany and Naples afterwards. Rome is a great place to go, and I think generally it's sort of an all-around great family place to go. There is so much that you can do there that like you will never see everything in Rome. There's a ton of stuff. There's a ton off the beaten path. Just, you know, the most unexpected things. So there are a ton of reasons to go to Rome. The most popular ones are doing like the Colosseum and seeing a lot of the Roman ruins. There's so many Roman baths to go and visit. It's a little bit crazy. And there's a lot of really fantastic museums with Renaissance era art that I feel like I will never get through them all. For children friendly, again, Colosseum is great, and they've recently opened up the sort of like the basement under part that you can actually tour that now. That's the first time ever that they've had this open. So it's a great time. If you've already been to the Colosseum and you're thinking about going again, you do get the added benefit of seeing things that you have not been able to see before. And of course, you've got the Roman Forum nearby, and that's a good place to take kids, as well as there's a film lot that you can go and explore, and there's a gladiator school that you can take your kids to, and they can play around and be a gladiator for a day. You can check out city passes. There's information there that'll give you extra passes or like discounts on museums and things like that. Again, because we had just sort of touched on how there are such regional specialties in terms of food and wine, you kind of see that as well in terms of what you're looking in for souvenirs. So if you really want to itemize and keep it local for what you're looking at, Rome is one of those places that I guess because everybody comes to Rome, you find a ton of kitsch, and it's harder to find really things that are specialized towards the region. Obviously, with all the churches, you can go near the churches and get all of their specialized like religious icons like rosaries and Bibles and things like that. There's some really great Pecorino Romano cheeses that are made kind of locally. And if you want something local, it might be a good idea to look up some independent artisans beforehand. There's some really fantastic shops, but you do have to really either know about them in advance or really keep a sharp eye out for them, because it's hard to see past all of the regular kitsch and the other things that they're hawking. If you're cool with that and you're like, I'm only going to Italy once and I'm only going to get to Rome and I'm fine, I'm going to buy my Venetian Murano glass in Rome and I'm going to buy my Tuscan boar sausage in Rome, that's cool, right? It's I'm not judging what you want to bring home at all. I'm just saying that make sure that you look out for what's going to make you happy, right? So you will find a lot of that stuff as well, and they've made it really easy. There's just a ton of souvenir shops and things like that. So, but those are some good specialties in terms of Rome shopping. So for their regional food, probably the two most famous ones are carbonara and cacio e pepe, which are both types of pasta. So carbonara is a pasta with pancetta, or like a sort of a bacon with pecorino romano cheese and eggs to make sort of a creamy sauce. And cacio e pepe is basically a pasta with a little bit of olive oil, excuse me, cacio cheese and pepper. Like literally cacio is the cacio cheese and pepe is pepper. So it's also very simple but really delicious pasta. Another one that you'll find is the amatriciana, which is guanciale. You might sometimes find pancetta subbed for it with, again, pecorino or romano cheese, a white wine, tomatoes, and pepper and chilies. So really, really good. Artichokes are local. Saltimbocca is sort of an interesting one because it's called jumps in your mouth. It's basically veal pounded sort of flat, and then with prosciutto and sage and rolled up and cooked in butter. I think it's the picture on the left, the second from the top. Other places that you'll go, you'll find something called saltimbocca, and it's like a type of flatbread. So it's just keep in mind, depending on where you are, what you'll be ordering. Also, another one is supli, which is sort of a rice mixture and they'll mix in sort of meat and tomato and then fill it with cheese on the inside, make it a little ball and then fry it up. So that's the top picture. It's called supli in Rome, but you'll find it's originally also a Sicilian treat, and you'll see it called the arancia because it looks like a little orange. So everywhere else that you go, you'll find the same thing, but it's called arancia. Maratozzi are yeasted buns. I haven't found them too often. And then for a local wine of the Lazio Rome region, there's a Frescati, which is sort of a straw colored wine, and there's a pretty big range of flavors on it. Usually, I think when I've been in Rome, they push less their really regional wines, and they'll actually try to push a lot of the Tuscan wines because you're not too far from there. So some of the best places to go to nosh on something, the Antico Cafe Greco is a historic coffee bar. It's really close to the Spanish Steps. It's got like beautiful old world coffee, like historic building, and it's really beautiful, but you're also paying for that. Obviously you'll go in and you're like, I can tell, like, you know, revolutions were planned here. Like this has a lot of history and a lot, you know, that like a lot of famous people over the ages have had coffee there. There's also a tea house right across the street from the Spanish Steps. So if you're not really feeling coffee, but you want to do tea, you can do that. And both of them are rather expensive, but it's an interesting treat and beautiful decor inside and everything like that. There's also a place called Trapezzino. It's a street food where they take like a focaccia or a flatbread pouch and they stuff it with different fillings. It was originally the first restaurant that started doing this was over in the Trastevere neighborhood of Rome, but they've opened up a bunch of different locations, and now you can even find it in the Rome Termini train station. So it's sort of become a really popular local food. And then just again, a fantastic restaurant right off of the Piazza Navona. So I don't necessarily recommend eating directly in the Piazza Navona. It's a great place to people watch and have an aperitivo and a spritz and sit. But if you're talking about getting food, depending on where you're sitting, you can maybe not get the best meal. But honestly, you just take one side street over, and this place just had the most fantastic food. So when you're traveling around Rome to get to the different places that you're trying to go, again, a lot of times you'll fly into Rome Fiumicino, which is the hub. There's a train that will go back and forth, and there's actually some buses as well that are like sort of express buses that you can pay for that'll drop you off in Rome Termini. Rome Termini is the train station hub. There are some other sort of larger train stations like in Trastevere and Aurelia, but Termini is sort of the big hub. And then there's also a really large bus hub at Termini as well. So my goal usually when I go to Rome is to stay right near the Termini train station because you can just get a single daily like transportation pass, which for 24 hours is like €7, or like I think it's 12.50 or maybe 13 if you do a 2-day pass. And then that gets you all the metro and train and bus and little trams, like anything that you see that runs, you now have access to. So it makes it a lot easier to get around Rome, that you're not just depending on your feet or really expensive taxis. So that's sort of my recommendation. And I like just staying in a hotel near there because it makes it easy that whenever you're done, it's easy to get back to. You can do cars or scooter rentals, and you can drive to Rome, but my recommendation is to park your car and leave it until you're leaving, because driving in Rome and driving in Naples are super, unless you've done it before and you're comfortable with it, it can be chaotic and dangerous and really intimidating. And I think there are a lot of people where it can kind of ruin their vacation having to drive around doing it, when especially with Rome, the transportation system there is so easy. It's silly to kind of push yourself to do something like that when you can just easily walk and metro yourself to wherever you need to go. So Rome is quite pedestrian friendly, but it's a very large city. So my recommendation is to just sort of be smart about your bucket list on the things that you want to go, so that you're not sort of hoofing it all over the place and realizing that after like 2 days that you're just walking yourself back to a place that you've already explored previously, right? So hit a location, hit all of the things in that location that you want to do, and then move on, rather than sort of bobbing around, unless it's really easy for you to kind of go back. But you're spending you can still spend a lot of time on transportation. So in terms of bucket list activities, again, there's so much to do and so many things that when you think of Rome, you're automatically thinking of, oh, okay, well, there's the Spanish steps. In the picture here, which is on the left in the middle, for your Spanish steps, that little sort of orangey pink house just to the right is the Keats Shelley house. So Percy Shelley and Keats, and I don't remember if Mary Shelley I think she was briefly there, lived there for a while. And so they've got a museum and they've recreated the rooms and stuff like that. And again, you can have high tea there now. So there's some really amazing little places that are just right there, right in the middle of everything else that you just didn't know was also there. You can go and check out the Colosseum, and the Roman Forum is right there, as well as the Circus Maximus, and it takes up quite a bit of space. So there's actually like multiple metro stops for it. But while you're there, you can also go visit the Capitoline museums, and they have an amazing diverse amount of art there as well. You're not too far. You can walk over to the Trevi Fountain and the Pantheon. And you've got the Gallery Barberini. Sorry, my screen is cut off, so I have to go off of my memory here.
Yeah, there's so much to see, isn't there, Beth?
There's a ton.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's just a lot to explore, and it's fun to check out some of the blogs because they'll give you good options on what to see besides the stuff that you're used to seeing. So you can check out St. Peter's and Vatican. That's a full day on its own. When you're done, it's nice to just do a little river stroll and walk over to there's a big fortress just down the way, and there's some fantastic photos with the bridges. The Borghese Gallery is great and has a ton of art. Again, I think there's like 3 or 4 different baths. You can check out the Diocletian baths. They have a fantastic museum inside it. And then there are some greater basilicas in addition to St. Peter's that are in the Rome area. So there's like St. John the Lateran, there's Santa Maria Maggiore, and they're amazing, amazing churches, and they're massive. So that's something, if you're into doing some of the churches, you can spend days just doing churches and finding amazing art inside a lot of these.
Yeah, Rome is absolutely amazing. But just to respect time, why don't we let just the last slide there on Rome? Again, people will have a copy of this presentation so they know where to check out. But these are fantastic tips. So I believe we're off to Tuscany next.
Yes. Tuscany is fantastic, and I think it's typically a good sort of romantic getaway or like a girls' trip getaway. There are some family-friendly things to do while you're there. There's definitely towers in some of the small towns. If you go to Orvieto, there's some catacombs that you can climb down into, and there's a well. And there are some really lovely little like Airbnbs and agriturismos that are sort of kid-centric and have things to do. But generally, based on sort of what it's known for, you're going to go for the wine or the spa towns or the rolling hills and stuff like that, rather than trying to make it a big family vacation. But I have heard of a lot of families really enjoying it as well. Shopping specialties, leather, of course, which is nice. They use the whole cow, so you can have your beefsteak Fiorentina and then get your leather as well. Florence has amazing stationery that you'll find throughout Tuscany. The wines there, especially like, Chianti, there's a Montepulciano and a San Gimignano, are amazing, and lots of diverse cheeses, truffles, wild boar sausage, and then alabaster and marble as well. So your foods and treats, Tuscany is kind of known for like, they call it like cibo povera, like a poor food. It wasn't always really a very well-to-do area, and you're really sort of in the countryside. So you kind of get very rustic meals there. And so you'll see a lot of sort of similar things. The panzanella, again, your steak Florentine, beefsteak Fiorentina. You can get the papa al pomodoro, which is the bread soup with tomato, garlic, and basil, which is kind of similar, but it's a soup rather than the panzanella, which is more of like a salad with soaked bread. These other ones are kind of pushing the limit a little bit. So if you're an adventurous eater, you can get like chicken liver or cow stomach and stuff like that. Again, wines, there's a Montepulciano, a Abruzzo that you will find all over, that's fantastic. And if you're a fan of white, you kind of get hit in the face with all the Chianti there, but there's a really lovely Vernaccia di San Gimignano that's a fantastic white wine as well. For transportation, you can fly into Florence or Pisa, but again, you can kind of fly wherever you need to and then just take the train in. The trains with Trenitalia will take you into all of the small towns if you're looking. There are other bus places that you can take the bus and just get driven around as well if you want. And I would say here is one of the good places to rent a car or a bike, especially considering that you have like the Val d'Orcia, which is like the Golden Valley that is really, really well known for driving through. Driving here is excellent, but again, renting a car can be a little bit expensive. So it's good to sort of look and book in advance. Florence is sort of the big city hub of Tuscany, and there's a ton of things to do just in Florence. You've got a variety of the museums like the Uffizi, l'Accademia, where Michelangelo's David is. The Palazzo Vecchio has a big sculpture gallery outside, as well as just a bunch of beautiful architecture inside. And then the Bargello is another art gallery. The Duomo in Florence is spectacular, and there's a whole complex. I recommend, again, getting tickets in advance, as well as then the Piazza del Signoria is right outside the Palazzo Vecchia, and then you also have the Boboli Gardens, which are huge and a great place to sort of let everybody run around if you brought your kids with you. Pitti Palace is a palace that has 3 museums inside of it. San Lorenzo is a church that was sort of in the Uffizi family, in the Medici family. And so they've put a lot of money in stuff, and you can see the Michelangelo crypt where a bunch of the Medicis are buried now. And for a fantastic view of Florence, you can take a bus or walk across the river and up to Michelangelo Park and get fantastic sunset views. Again, outside of Florence, there's fantastic activities to go and explore the different Tuscan towns. There's Monte Termini, Montecaltini Terme, which is a huge, gorgeous spa town from sort of the mid 1800s. It's a beautiful place to stay. And then there are vineyards everywhere. So again, feel free to plan out your wine tasting or your, truffle hunting and cooking classes, as well as just sort of everything else. You're not terribly far from Cinque Terre, which is a little seaside series of towns that you can hike between. And there are trains that go there as well. So if you want the little villages perched on the cliff over the sea without going to Amalfi, they're there at Cinque Terre. And then in the southern part, there's Saturnia Hot Springs, which is right by a mill. And it's just sort of a big free open thermal spa. It's very, very sulfuric. So I've been told if you go, make sure that you take a swimming suit that you are planning on throwing out immediately after. So to hit up just the cities that you're looking at, to say there's so many, and there's a bunch that I'm not even going to touch on. These are sort of the most popular. It'll help give you an idea of maybe what you want to aim for and maybe what you're willing to skip. So Pisa, obviously you have the Leaning Tower. All of the buildings like the church and the baptistry along with the tower are all leaning as well. It's just that the tower is the most popular, but there's also a really beautiful piazza just down the street called the Piazza del Cavalieri that has some fantastic architecture in as well. Siena is the other sort of larger town in Tuscany, and there's a ton to do there. The Piazza del Campo is what you can see right there. It's sort of the big city center. The Duomo there is absolutely stunning, and there's so many things that you can do. In the summertime, for about 8 weeks, they actually will, generally you're walking on sort of a wooden floor layer to preserve the art that's been etched into the floor underneath. But for 8 weeks in the summertime, you can go and see, and they remove the wooden floors, and you can actually go and see these amazing etchings into marble depicting fantastic scenes. And then you also have like the Fontebranda, which is like an old fountain where people would go to collect their water. Lucca is farther north. It's not too far from Pisa. It's a very, very green little village, and you can actually walk or bike all the way around the city walls, and it's a beautiful, beautiful little city. The piazza inside is called the Piazza De La Infitetro because it was the original like Roman arena, and in the 1700s they took the ruins and then built this big set of buildings and apartments and restaurants and everything now. So you see the shape of the amphitheater, and then now the sort of working grounds are the piazza. And there's some really, really lovely Baroque churches in Lucca as well. And it was the birthplace to Puccini. You can find Puccini's house there. Pitigliano has the Orsini Palace. And it's also well known for being built up on this rock. So you can see sort of at the base of the rock, there's a bunch of Etruscan caves. So like going back, you're talking about like 4,000 or 5,000 BC, I think, as well as then a little section of town that's a really well preserved Jewish town called Little Jerusalem. Once you start going a little bit farther south, you get Montepulciano, again known for their Vernaccia wine. And so it's a really, really lovely red. They have some fantastic little piazzas at the base of Montepulciano. So you'll have to sort of drive outside the city. There's the Chiesa San Biagio, which is, you can't go inside, but it's a great place to go and pick up like a little panini or some sandwich or cheese and stuff like that, and just to have a picnic outside. It's a beautiful church to play with or to sort of explore. And then that's the beginning of that Val d'Orcia, which is the one of the most beautiful drives in Tuscany to do. Another city nearby is called Volterra, which has the Piazza di Priori and a nice old Roman amphitheater, which you can see is sort of, it hasn't been excavated as much, but it's a really lovely little area to go look at. San Gimignano is another medieval city, but it's really well known for its towers. So in its heyday, it was sort of a sign of fortune and wealth for these well-off families, and they had a big contest and designed and built these towers. At one time, there were 64 towers in San Gimignano. I think there's about 16 now, but you can climb up into the tower of the tallest one, which I think is like something original like Torre Grande or something like that, as well as my favorite gelateria shop. So it's called Gelateria Dondoli, and it has a sign out saying that it has these award-winning gelato flavors, and it's things like garden cheesecake or like just really inventive flavors. My favorite is the saffron and pine nut, actually. And then I have to add Orvieto. Orvieto is technically not in the region of Tuscany. It's in Lazio, which is where Rome is. However, it's not too far, and it is one of the most stunning little villages that I really have to recommend that you go. The Duomo there is also stunning. You can see a picture of it there. I think the outside might be even more beautiful than the inside, but just seeing the detail is incredible. And again, there's a fantastic catacombs tour where they talk about how the catacombs have been used up through World War II, as well as a well. So when you go to Orvieto, you can park at the base, and there's a big free public parking, and then you'll take a funicular up to the cliff in order to get into the village proper. Once you get off the funicular, just to the right is an amazing well that was built that you can basically you'll circle all the way down, and then you'll circle all the way up, and it's made like a double helix, so just like your DNA. And again, this was done, I think, back in the 1700s. So just a really stunning place. I highly recommend going and checking out the well. On to Naples. So there's a ton of things to do within Naples, but also just outside of Naples, that there are great little day trips. So you'll hit Naples because of there are a ton of Roman ruins. It was actually where the Greeks were originally coming up from Greece. This is some of the sort of earliest presence of them and like coming into Rome. As well as then you'll see Vesuvius. We've got really lovely beachy tropical islands like Capri and Ischia. And then you've got the Amalfi Coast with, again, your cliffside towns with little sorbet colored buildings that just sort of tumble down into the sea. It is a pretty children friendly thing. There's a lot to do here. You can find a lot of fantastic things for kids to do. In terms of shopping specialties, ceramics out of Vietri and the Amalfi Coast. Naples is one of the really prides itself on the quality and the original, like being one of the original places that makes cameos, and you can go to cameo stores and watch them actually make them and carve them out of the shell. Everything lemon. It's ridiculous here. And there are lemons in this area that are actually called Amalfi lemons, and they are like the size of a large grapefruit or your head. But the interesting thing about them is that they are a little bit sweeter, but also that when you cut it open, you'll find that like a significant amount is that white bitter part called the pith. However, in Amalfi lemons, it's actually not bitter. It almost tastes like a very, very mild melon, and so you can eat it. So you will find everything lemon here because there are a ton of lemon groves. So you'll find lemon ceramics, lemon candies, limoncello, and just sort of lemon everything. It'll show up on your linens and everything. The Amalfi Coast and Sorrento are really well known for making custom handmade sandals made to order, leather bags and belts as well. And Naples downtown is known for their precipi, which is like the nativity scenes, but they kind of take it and put it on steroids so that their nativity scenes are much, much bigger, and they incorporate the entire town. So you'll find a little pizzeria and like somebody else's house in amongst with the nativity scene is not really the focal point. Chocolates, there's a lot of other fantastic cheeses, especially the mozzarella della bufala, or sorry, mozzarella bufala. which is a buffalo mozzarella. So it's a little higher in fat, and it's like a fresh mozzarella. It's really, really lovely, and you'll find it on a lot of the pizza. And then we, of course, like package up all of those foods to go.
Of course, of course. Beth,
Of
this
course.
sounds absolutely amazing. I feel like we could talk for an hour just on Naples alone. But we have about 10 minutes or so left of the presentation. So, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Sounds great. I will try to go really quickly. So special foods, because you're on the coast with the sea here, you're going to get a lot of fish and calamari and stuff like that. Again, your mozzarella di bufala is something that you'll find. And you can't go to Naples or Naples area and not try the pizza. The local focus is on a margarita pizza and a marinara pizza, which is like just the tomato sauce and cheese. They are very anti-pineapple pizza here, and just like you stick to what works. So there are a lot of sort of standard pizzas, but those are sort of the ones to focus on. Downtown Naples, you'll especially as well find a little pastry called the sfogliatella, which is the little shell-shaped pastry. It's like little layers of phyllo with a ricotta filling. And then delizia al limone is a lemon dessert. It's basically like slightly lemon flavored cake with lemon flavored cream and lemon everything, but it's not overly lemon. It's really quite lovely. Limoncello, pretty much anything you find, it was probably made in the Naples area. And then there's actually a lot of fantastic wines. A lot of wines are also specifically grown on the slopes of Vesuvius. So you find like the Lacrima Christi del Vesuvio, the Aglianico are both reds. And then for whites, you'll have a Falangina, which is sort of like a sort of mid-level white. The Greco di Tufo is slightly minerally, but it's really light. There's a Fiano de Avellino, and then a Biancolella that you usually find on the islands. For best places, we talked about the amazing historic cafe in Rome. There's the same type of thing here in Naples. It's called the Cafe Gambrinus, and it's still got the old Art Nouveau decor. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous coffee shop, and it also happens to be right in the main Piazza del Plebiscito, which is across from the Royal Palace. There's also a place just down the road called the pasticceria, so the pastry shop, Papella, and it's known for the fiocca di neve, which I'm just starting to see them around, and it looks like sort of a large donut hole that's been filled with cream, but it is much more light and decadent and just completely lovely, so highly recommend. And then if you're in Sorrento, one of my favorite restaurants there is called O Parrucchiana La Favorita. It has a huge garden inside. So you're in like a large greenhouse, and the food is to die for. And they say that they've invented cannelloni. I don't know how realistic that is, but it's still quite delicious. Transportation, Naples Airport. The main train stations are Naples Garibaldi. If you're taking the train in to visit somebody like me who lives just outside, you'll probably go to Afragola instead. Ferries will run from Pozzuoli to Sorrento and from downtown Naples. So it's good to sort of keep an eye out on where you're trying to take the ferry and where you're trying to go to, because there are a few different hubs. And then the downtown transportation is really quite, it's very chaotic. There's a lot of different crazy lines, but you can get anywhere you're going. And there's just like a general daily ticket for €4.50 that will get you on all of the different types of transportation within the downtown. Again, Naples, if you thought Rome driving was crazy, Naples is even crazier. Do not drive here. We'll just keep it like, don't, just don't do it. Downtown, the Museum of Archaeology in Naples has the most impressive display of antiquities, because they pulled all of the best artifacts out of Pompeii and Ercolano and all of the sort of other old Roman ruins and towns. So it's a fantastic place to go to. It's sort of a must do if you're going for some of the ruins like Pompeii. Again, downtown, you have the Piazza del Plebiscito, the Royal Palace. The theater San Carlo is actually tied to the palace, and it's the oldest continuously working opera theater, but also the oldest opera theater in Europe for sure. It was built in 1737, and they do some fantastic performances there. Lots of old fortress castles. You can go take the funicular up to Castello Sant'Elmo and you get an amazing view of the entire city of Naples. You also have the Castello dell'Ovo and the Castel Nuovo. The Galleria, if you remember the big Galleria in Milan, there's two of them in Naples. One of them, the most impressive, is the Galleria Umberto, which is right across from the main piazza there. And then there's a ton of underground tours that talk about the tunnels and basically the Greek town underneath Naples before Naples became Roman, as well as catacombs. There's a Fontanelle cemetery that is not really a catacombs, but it was when they had their plagues, all of the bones sort of built up over there. So some bit more of a crazy ossuary with like a whole cult associated with it. So if you want to find out more about that, message me. Capodimonte is one of the old palaces that's been turned into the art museum. San Severo Chapel has amazing marble statues, and the guy was again a crazy prince who dabbled in like necromancy and trying to make things gold and stuff like that. And then Spaccanapoli is a great little shopping street, and right next to it is Christmas Alley, which is the market where you can get your recipe little pieces and stuff like that. For your day trips outside, again, we talked about Vesuvius. You can take a tour and hike all the way up to the top of Mount Vesuvius. At the same time, it's not far, and it's also only about half a day. You can explore the old town of Ercolano, which was buried in mud from the same eruption in 79 AD that Pompeii was. Paestum is a Greek town a little bit farther south with really, really well restored Greek buildings and things like that. And then of course you've got the Amalfi Coast. Sorrento is a great little shopping town and a good place to base out of, but you've also got, it's about an hour and a half away from all of the other Amalfi Coast towns like Positano, Amalfi, Ravello, Vietri, all that. And then from there, it's also really easy to take a ferry over to Ischia and Capri. So if you're looking at doing Amalfi Coast, the best two cities to base out of are Sorrento and Amalfi. Positano is sort of like it's the one that everybody sort of talks about the most. It's like the quirky little Amalfi Coast town, but Amalfi has the most other ferries and a beautiful Duomo as well. If you go a little bit farther south, you get to Ravello, which has a beautiful medieval, like almost reminds you of Tuscan walled city, and a few gorgeous villas with gardens that you can check out. And they have a jazz festival in the autumn. Vietri is the best place to go do your ceramic shopping for any kind of ceramics. And then there's also a lovely little beach there, just like in all of the other towns. For the islands, Capri, everybody knows, you can go check out the rich and famous. There's two very small cities there, as well as the Blue Grotto, but it's hard to visit the Blue Grotto unless you're going in the summertime. A lot of times the tides will make it impossible to visit. So you have to be very careful when you're choosing a tour guide who will take you there and kind of check out the time of year that you're there to find out if you can actually go. If you can only do one island, my recommendation is Ischia. It's a much, much bigger island, but there's a lot of fantastic little towns to visit. There's the Ischia Ponte, which has my favorite castle, the Castello Aragonese in it. And then on the other side of the island, you have a little more thermal activity. The whole island is a bit of a like thermal spa town, but there are a few big public paid thermal spa beaches and pools that you can go. So it's either I have it here. Negombo is one of them, and the other one is Poseidon for the thermal parks. But you can usually get a hotel that has its own thermal pools right there. And then on the backside is Forio and Sant'Angelo, where they have the beaches where the fumaroles, or like the thermal gas vents actually come out from the beaches. So you get hot sand, or you can still see the gas coming out there. Procida is a very, very tiny little tour of little island that you can take a ferry to. You don't need more than a few hours to do it, but it will be Italy's UNESCO Capital of Culture for 2022. And then for other places to consider, these are just a few other options. Again, Italy is so diverse, so you can always go farther north and see Lago Garda, Lago Como. By that point, you're almost in the Dolomites as well, or on the other side, you can go see Milan and Bergamo. Puglia is a region that's in sort of the very southern Italian boot. And it's an amazing, amazing little region because you have such diverse towns that you'll have like the cave town of Matera, or you'll have the town of Alberobella that has little like dwarf looking truly houses that have their little conical houses with little pictures on the roofs that you can see there. And then Lecce as well, which is like a marble Baroque Italian little village as well. And then all around it, you have the amazing beach towns as well with pristine turquoise beaches. Venice and Verona, of course. And then again, down to the south, you can do the island of Sicily. So maybe at a certain point, we'll get to talk about some of these other things. But for now, that concludes my presentation and we can open it up for questions. Thanks, guys.